Some of you might know me as Miss Moten. Some of you might know me as Miss Joy. Some of you might know me as Minister Joy. If you really know me, you know me as Joy. And maybe some of you don't know me at all, but whoever you are, welcome! I am finally starting my first video, and I'm only slightly nervous about it. If you want to know what to expect from this page and why I'm even doing this, this is the video where I'll explain it. So 10 years ago, in 2014, while I was a student at Baylor University, I was young, I didn't know where my life was headed, and I was actually going through a really hard time. We had experienced grief within our friendship community at my high school. I was experiencing some deep loss and just confusion. It was a lot going on. But the bottom line was, during that time of pain, I had always been taught as a kid to bring my pain to God. And this was my first time doing it in a really deep, raw, by myself kind of way, because I was really hurting. During that time, there was no, but just so we're clear, there was no Mufasa voice. There was no Gabriel popping up in my dorm room. I was really hurting, I was crying, I was praying, and just from deep within, I felt like God wanted me to use my pain for good rather than allowing it to destroy me. I felt like, there are other people that have experienced some of the things that I've experienced, both good and bad. And it's important these days to know that we're not alone. So a big part of this ministry endeavor is helping people know they're not alone. All of that is to say, back in 2014, I wanted to start a digital ministry endeavor to encourage people. And that's pretty much the point of this. So if you are looking for things like holy pep talks to encourage you, or how-to things, and so things like how to study scripture for yourself, not necessarily in an academic way, but in a devotional way. If you want to dive to the depths of how we see Christian theology in our everyday culture, in the movies we watch, and the TV shows we watch, this is for you. But above all, if you want to grow in your faith, this is for you. So let's do it together. You're probably wondering why it took me 10 years to get this off the ground. To answer that question, I experienced a lot of perfectionism, a lot of what if questions. What if I fail? What if it flops? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I embarrass myself? What if it goes wrong? So many what ifs that I what ifed myself into not doing it. So for the last 10 years, I've learned a lot. And even though I wouldn't recommend what ifs, I will say God has made the most of my journey. These last 10 years have not been wasted. I've learned a lot. I've learned how much I can trust God. And now I'm finally to a place where I'm ready. And a big part of what got me ready, pushed me over the edge, was my students, both my youth ministry students and the students from the school I used to teach at. So shout out to y'all for encouraging me in that way. So now that that's over, I'm gonna give you a glimpse into what it's gonna be. Here's an example of what a day of a video on this channel might look like. How about we start with some movie theology? And we're gonna start with one of the most popular movies of this summer, Inside Out 2. Here we go. Oh my goodness, Inside Out 2 might have easily been the movie of the summer. I loved it, and I know a lot of people loved it, and I could not help. I find that when I watch movies, when I watch TV, I tend to think a lot about Christian theology. I tend to find that there are deeply embedded lessons. I'm not saying the movie directors put them in there. I'm just saying from my lane of life, when I watch this stuff, it makes me think of the goodness of Jesus. And if I had to put a verse, a thesis statement on the message of Inside Out 2, what it can teach us about God, what it can teach us about Christian theology, I think it would be this one. Weeping may endure for a night, but hey, joy comes in the morning. So more specifically, I want to get into the different emotions and how they teach us different things about God, but also how they teach us how we can navigate our emotions from a biblical perspective, of course. For one thing, I think in the first movie, If you'll remember, Riley, she had her usual emotions: joy, sadness, anger, fear. I think that was all of them, right? If I'm missing one, I don't know. But she had all the regular emotions, and I think a big part of the first movie was us knowing that it's important to feel all of our emotions. In that movie, Joy was really trying to keep sadness to a minimum. And I think we all know what it feels like to go through that. We don't like feeling sadness. That's not comfortable. But sadness is an important emotion to have. We learned that in the first movie. And that fits perfectly in line with Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes, we are told there is a time and a season for everything under the heavens. There's a time to be happy, and there's a time to be sad. Our emotions are appropriate, and it's important that we give them the space that they need to have, when appropriate, of course. So that was Inside Out 1, but this second one brought many new emotions, but there was one emotion in particular that kind of took the cake, I think, for a lot of people, and that's anxiety. Anxiety is something that everybody contends with to a degree, but I know people that contend with it at levels that are just unprecedented. I know what it means to feel anxious. I hate feeling anxious, and what I love about this movie is that it really tried to get us to understand what was going on with respect to anxiety, how anxiety had good intentions. She wasn't the villain in the movie. I felt like she was, but they didn't portray her as a villain. She was a valid emotion that was trying to look out for Riley's good, but we all know what happened, those of us who saw it. So anyways, here are some quotes that some of the emotions said throughout the movie that I think that we can learn from. So one thing anxiety said in the movie, and I quote,
"And my job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see. I plan for the future." Oh!
Anxiety said this to Joy when she first met her. All the original emotions were shook when the new emotions showed up, and off the bat, anxiety was ready to take over some stuff. I thought it was really profound, the distinction that she made. Fear is of what you can see, but anxiety is focused on what she cannot see. And that's the thing about anxiety in a general sense. It makes us focus on what we can't see, but it focuses more on the negative possibilities than the positive possibilities. Anxiety in the movie had good intentions, was trying to plan for what Riley couldn't see, and there's a place for that. With that said, I do think that, faith and peace have a huge role in the life of believers, and that's the thing about faith and peace: they aren't feelings. Faith is not a feeling. Faith is an action word, and it's important to maintain that even in the midst of anxiety. Peace also, you can feel calm, but peace in the biblical sense is not necessarily talking about a feeling. It's talking about a sense of, it's refusing to panic, essentially. It's refusing to get shaken up. It's this deep sense of groundedness. And it's this deep sense of groundedness that comes from God. It doesn't come from us. Again, these aren't feelings. I would say when we feel anxious, it's important to acknowledge that for what it is. I do it all the time. Sometimes when you feel anxious, you don't even realize it. It just kind of happens. So when I feel anxious, I tend to try to notice that. And as a Christian, I tend to try to submit that to my faith. I want God to be with me in my anxiety. I want God to walk me through it. And as he walks me through it, I want the peace that he offers me, because he offers it. And I access that through my faith. So that was one thing anxiety said. Something I think we can learn about anxiety from the movie is that anxiety is to be taken seriously, but I don't think we should be glorifying it. Anxiety should not. So y'all remember that part of the movie? So powerful, where Joy, Riley's having the anxiety attack and it's going berserk. So relatable, by the way. So relatable. And Joy tells her,
"You don't get to choose who Riley is." Anxiety? You need to let her go.
I wanted to cry because y'all, and that was even personal to me because my whole name is Joy. So to have a character named Joy telling anxiety, like, you can't have hold of Riley. And something else that stood out to me was notice how there was a distinction between Riley's feelings, her identity, and her beliefs. Those were three different things. You had the feelings characters, of course, but her identity was not the same as her feelings. Her feelings and her beliefs shaped what she thought about her identity and what was true. I thought that was so powerful because so often we identify as our feelings. Instead of saying, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling joyful, I'm feeling this, we tend to make that our identity. And then when the feeling changes, now we feel like we've changed as an individual. And that's a dangerous thing. Seasons come, seasons go. We don't want... Think about how often your emotions change on a given day. You do not want your identity to have to change that many times. That's kind of stressful. Another thing I think we learned from Inside Out too is that's in alignment with the Bible is it's important to be compassionate and humble. So throughout the movie, Riley was making some significant decisions, and we can see what's going on in her brain. We can see why she chose to go with the older hockey girls, and we can see why she chose not to hang out with her friends that she came in with. But Riley's friends, they hadn't the slightest clue what was going on with her. They literally, it looked, at least as I was watching the movie, I was thinking they probably think she's a terrible friend and they probably think she's switching up. And I know in this day and age, we love to cut people off when they switch up on us. But I think this movie, in showing us what's going on in Riley's head and giving us a glimpse of the girl's perspective of it, it's important for us to be compassionate. Riley was not making the best decisions. And she was doing that because she was trying to come to terms with the fact that two of her best friends were not going to the same school as her. That's a hard thing, and she didn't know how to wrestle with that. So as Christians, we never know what people are going through. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what sorts of stuff they're working through. And we need to be patient and compassionate and understanding, because we've all had our days where we've allowed our emotions to get the best of us, or where we maybe didn't know how to come to terms with a certain change in our lives. One of the most quoted parts of the movie is from Joy. Joy, she's annoyed because all the other feelings are being negative Nancy's, and she turns around and she says,
Delusional? Of course I'm delusional! Do you know how hard it is to stay positive all the time when all you folks do is complain, complain, complain? Jiminy mother loving toaster.
Again, very relatable to me as a Bible teacher and a youth minister, because sometimes I feel that way, doggone it. It's hard to be joyful and, when other people are being negative, dragging you down. But I love that she said, delusional? Of course I'm delusional. And I love that she said that, because joy in the Christian sense is not gaslighting the other emotions. We learned this in the first movie. Joy is not denying the reality of the situation. Joy knew what was going on with Riley. She knew it was bad. But joy is all about being resilient in the midst of what we see going wrong. And the other thing is, joy and truth go hand in hand. It is really hard. It is really complicated to be joyful when there is complaining in the midst. It's hard. So I love that Joy had her little moment and went off, because even though she went off, she doesn't cease to be who she is. She perseveres and she leads them forward. So I like that. So we got to keep joy in context, and we've got to keep happiness in context. By the way, joy and happiness aren't the same thing. Happiness is based on circumstance. Joy, endures. In the Christian sense, that is. Joy can coexist with other emotions that we're feeling without being overtaken. Shout out to Dr. Angela Williams-Gorel, who taught me that. Another thing that was said during the movie, Anxiety said this. She's having a conversation with Joy, and she says, we all have a job to do, in the sense of the emotions having a job to do. And she is so right. In the Christian sense, I think something we can learn is that emotions do have a job and a role in our lives, and that role slash job should not be taken out of context. On this end, there is danger in minimizing the role of emotions. We saw what suppressed emotions were like in the movie. But on this side, there's danger in glorifying the role of emotions. And we see an example of that in how anxiety quite literally shifted Riley's sense of self. Anxiety tainted her beliefs by shaping her memories through the filter of those feelings, and it messed up Riley's sense of identity. So we don't want to neglect emotions, but we don't want to worship them / glorify them. In both movies, I think we see how emotions are ill-equipped to fully care for us in the way that we need to be cared for. While emotions have their place, they're not the fullness of what we need and who we are. All of Riley's emotions mean well, and sometimes they do help, but at other times, they complicate. In both movies, emotions had a time to step up, and they had a time where they needed to step aside so that something bigger could transpire and help Riley out. And in our own lives, I think we need to be intentional about identifying when our emotions need to step up, when we need to feel some stuff, and when we need to submit our emotions to something bigger, when emotions need to submit to the truth of our faith. I think that's important. Okay, well, this is the end of my first video, and I'd love to know y'all's thoughts on it and what you think. I'd love for you to be a part of the conversation. Do you see any Christian themes in that movie that maybe I didn't mention? Were there things that stood out to you? I'd love to hear what you think. Outside of that, I'd love to hear if you have any questions about Christian theology or things that you think should be addressed or that we should be having more conversation about. I would love to hear your thoughts. But if not, thank you for watching this video, and I'm excited to make another one. See you next time.